different components, and most of these are going to be connected to the system using different cables and connecting those to different connections or ports. Now, we're going to be focusing our time on which cables are going to be used with each of those different components, the speeds of each data cable, and how much power they can provide, as well as other important features. Now, it's important to remember that the computers measure data transfer mobile devices, either internally inside the system or externally. After all, a computer is made up of a lot of different components, and most of these are going to be connected to the system using different cables and connecting those to different connections or ports. Now, we're going to be focusing our time on which cables are going to be used with each of those different components. The speeds of each data cable, and how much power they can provide, as well as other important features. Now, it's important to remember that the computers measure data transfer and storage a bit differently, either using bits or bytes as we transfer the data using those various cables that we're going to be talking about. Overall, a computer is made up of a lot of different components, and most of these are going to be connected to the system using different cables and connecting those to different connections or ports. Now, we're going to be focusing our time on which cables are going to be used with each of those different components, the speeds of each data cable, and how much power they can provide, as well as other important features. Now, it's important to remember that the computers measure data transfer and storage a bit differently, either using bits or bytes as we transfer the data using those various cables that we're going to be talking about. Now, in computers, the term bit refers to a binary digit. A single bit can store only one of two values. It's either a 1 or a 0. Now, if we combine 4 bits together, we get what's called a nibble. Because, computer professionals have a sense of humor. Now, if we combine 8 bits together, we get something even bigger, which we call a byte. This is spelled B-Y-T-E. Now, what we want to do here is measure the amount of data to be transferred, and we do this inside of bits or in magnitudes of bits. Now, for example, let's say I wanted to transfer 50 bits of data to you. This would be written as 50B with a lowercase b. Now, if I was going to send that data to you and it took 2 seconds to send it, I would say that my data transfer rate, or the speed of the data transfer, was 25 bits per second, or 25 BPS. Now notice I had 50 bits of data and it took me 2 seconds to transfer. So we divide 50 bits by 2 seconds, and this gives us our data transfer rate of 25 bits per second. Now, these days, we rarely are going to deal with something that slow. Instead, we're going to be dealing with things that are in terms of hundreds or thousands or millions of times faster than that bits per second. Now, to prevent us from being overwhelmed with a lot of zeros in our numbers, we can use magnitudes of bits to represent that. Now, if I have 1,000 bits, I would call this 1 KB or 1 kilobit. And this is written with a capital K for the 1,000 and the lowercase b for the bits. This specific uppercase and lowercase convention is really important because that lowercase b indicates that we're dealing with bits, while an uppercase B would indicate that we're dealing with bytes, and those are two different measurements because remember, a byte is going to be 8 bits. Now, if I was able to transfer 1 kilobit of data every second, we would write this as 1 capital K, little b, little p, little s, or 1 kbps, which is 1 kilobit per second. Now, as we go up in size, we're going to use multiple of bits, such as bits with the lowercase b, kilobits with a capital K, lowercase b, megabits, or a capital M, lowercase b, gigabits, capital G, lowercase b, and terabits, capital T, lowercase b, to represent those. Each time we go up a size, we're going to increase our factor by a matter of 1,000. So, bits is 1, kilobits is 1,000, megabits is 1 million, gigabits is 1 billion, and terabits is going to be 1 trillion bits. Now, on the other hand, if I'm storing data, terabits is going to be 1 trillion bits. Now, on the other hand, if I'm storing data, I'm going to write this in terms of bytes. Now, the indicates that we're dealing with bits, while an uppercase B would indicate that we're dealing with bytes, and those are two different measurements because remember, a byte is going to be 8 bits. Now, if I was able to transfer 1 kilobit of data every second, we would write this as 1 capital K, little b, little p, little s, or 1 kbps, which is 1 kilobit per second. Now, as we go up in size, we're going to use multiple of bits, such as bits with the lowercase b, kilobits with a capital K, lowercase b, megabits, or a capital M, lowercase b, gigabits, capital G, lowercase b, and terabits, capital T, lowercase b, to represent those. Each time we go up a size, we're going to increase our factor by a matter of 1,000. So, bits is 1, kilobits is 1,000, megabits is 1 million, gig. On the other hand, if I'm storing data, I'm going to write this in terms of bytes. Now remember, a byte is 8 bits. So if I save that 1 kilobit of data to a file, that file will actually go from being 1,000 bits to being 125 bytes, because 1,000 bits divided by 8 bits per byte gives me 125 bytes of data. Now if I had 1 million bits, I would write this as 1 uppercase m lowercase b, or 1 million bits. Now, if I had 1 million bytes, though, I would write this as a capital M and a capital B. This means I have capital M and capital B, or megabytes, and this is actually 8 times larger than capital M lowercase b, which is megabits, in terms of the number of bits being stored in a given file. Remember, anytime you see little b, we're talking about bits, and anytime you see a big or capital B, we are talking about bytes. And this is going to be 8 times more than the number of bits you had. And this is often a trick that marketing companies will use on people who don't understand the difference. For example, let's say that I work trying to sell internet services to home users. I might give you the choice of 2 different options from 2 different companies. The first option is for a 1 gigabit per second connection for $99 per month. That's 1 capital G little b. Now the second choice I'm going to give you is one for a 250 megabyte connection, or 250 capital M capital B for that same $99. Now which one would you choose? Well, you need to decide what they actually measure, because they're actually being measured in 2 different things. Not only is one using mega versus giga, but one's using bits versus bytes. So you should be choosing the 250 megabyte per second connection, because even though 250 megabytes may initially look smaller than the 1 gigabit connection, you need to remember that the big B means that we're dealing with bytes, and bytes are 8 times larger than the little b, or bits. So 250 megabytes per second is actually going to be 2,000 megabits per second, or 2 gigabits per second. So for the same $99, 250 megabytes per second will actually give you 2 gigabits per second of speed, which is double the speed of that 1 gigabit per second connection for the same cost of $99 per month. Now, I want you to keep this in mind as we go through this section, because we're going to be talking all about cables, and that's going to be using those things for data transfer or data storage. And if we're doing data transfer, you'll see me talking about bits. But if I'm dealing with data storage, I'm going to be talking about bytes. So keep this in mind as we talk about bits and bits per second and bytes per second, or their multipliers of kilo, mega, giga, and tera. Now in this section of the course, we're going to be focused on Domain 3, hardware, and specifically Objectives 3.2 and 3.4. Now, Objective 3.2 states that you must be able to summarize basic cable types and their connectors, features, and purposes. And Objective 3.4 states that you must compare and contrast storage devices. Now, if you're like most of my students, you're going to be going through your first CompTIA exam here with the A+. So I want to spend just a moment here to explain the word summarize and what that means in terms of this exam objective. Now, exam objectives start with a keyword or phrase like explain, summarize, compare and contrast, or given a scenario. Each of these words has a different meaning in terms of the level of knowledge that you're expected to have on test day. For objectives with the keyword summarize in them, like Objective 3.2 has, we are going to be asked to understand the meaning of the information learned in this course and then answer questions directly based on what you learned. For example, you're going to learn that a USB 3.0 cable can operate at speeds of up to 5 gigabits per second. On the test, you may get asked something like, which of the following versions of USB can operate at speeds of up to 5 gigabits per second? This is a summarized type of question. It's really focused on your ability to understand and recognize key facts and figures about different components that you're going to learn about in our lessons. So, as we go through this section of the course, remember, you're being asked to summarize the basic cable types and their connectors, features, and purposes for the exam. I'm going to be giving you a lot of information, such as the various data transfer speeds, the distance limitations, and the purposes for each cable type. You should write an exam. Look at all the various ports, different devices, and formats, including USB 1.0, 2.0, 3. Each of these words has a different meaning in terms of the level of knowledge that you're expected to have on test day. For objectives with the keyword summarized in them, like Objective 3.2 has, we are going to be asked to understand the meaning of the information learned in this course and then answer questions directly based on what you learned. For example, you're going to learn that a USB 3.0 cable can operate at speeds of up to 5 gigabits per second. On the test, you may get asked something like, which of the following versions of USB can operate at speeds of up to 5 gigabits per second? This is a summarized type of question. It's really focused on your ability to understand and recognize key facts and figures about different components that you're going to learn about in our lessons. So, as we go through this section of the course, remember, you're being asked to summarize the basic cable types and their connectors, features, and purposes for the exam. I'm going to be giving you a lot of information, such as the various data transfer speeds, the distance limitations, and the purposes for each cable type. You should write those down or highlight them in your study guide so you can go back and review them as you're studying for your exam. Now, as we begin this section, we're going to first take a look at a typical desktop computer and look at all the various ports and connectors that are on the outside of the computer case that allows us to connect the cable types to different devices. After I show you the outside of the computer, we're going to move on to the different types of cables that you're going to work with as a computer technician. We'll start out with USB cables and all of their different versions and formats, including USB 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, USB-C, USB Type-A, USB Type-B, Mini USB, and Micro USB. Next, we'll move into our coverage of the different types of video cables that you're going to encounter when you're working in the field, including HDMI. Then, we'll cover the different types of PATA, SCSI, serial attached. To finish things off, we'll take a start on your journey as a technician. Let's jump into our lessons focused on cable types in this section of the course.
In this lesson, we're going to take a look at a couple of examples of computer cases. First, we're going to use things that are tower style, gaming style, or computer. You'll notice that using a cable directly to your motherboard that says, "Computer, turn on, I want to use you." Under that, we have what's known as a memory card reader, and this one is an SD style slot. Under that, we have an audio jack, and this particular one is used for both input and output. This would allow you to connect headphones and a microphone to this audio jack using a 1/8 inch mini jack on the front of the case. Under that, we have 3 super speed USB style connectors that will allow you to connect other peripherals like a mouse, a keyboard, a webcam, a printer, or other devices to this tower. And finally, at the bottom, we have a USB-C style connector, which is also a super speed USB, but in a smaller form factor. Next, we're going to spin this tower around and take a look at the back side. Now, on the back side, we have several important components to look at. Starting on the right, you can see that we have a cooling fan that's blowing hot air out of the CPU and out of the motherboard and the case to be able to expel all that extra heat out of the system to keep the components inside cool. Moving over here to the top left, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see that we have three audio jacks that are 1/8 inch in size, just like we had the single one on the front. Now, the one on the front was actually an input-output style jack. These 3 are actually an output-only style jack. These 3 ports work together to create a 5.1 surround sound system connection for this computer. Underneath that, the next port we have is known as display port. And you'll notice this has this almost rectangular size shaped connector with one corner cut off on the top left. Underneath that, we have our HDMI style connector that you would use to connect a monitor or TV or other device for a video output display. Moving lower, we see 4 more of those super speed USB style jacks, and then 2 more underneath that, which are regular style USB. Now the difference here between the blue ones and the black ones is the blue ones are super speed, so they operate at speeds of USB 3, which is up to 5 gigabits per second, whereas the ones on the bottom that are black only operate at USB 2 speeds, and we'll cover that a lot more in depth as we get to our lessons on USB cables. Over on the right side of this cluster, you'll see a network jack, and this is known as an RJ45 style connector, and this can provide you with Ethernet access to your local area as an RJ45. You'll notice that in this lower style, gaming style, or all-in-one style. First, we're going to look at a standard workplace. connection, and you cut off. Or underneath that, which are super side of this cluster, you'll see a network jack, and this is known as an RJ45 style connector, and this can provide you with Ethernet access to your local area network over a wired connection. These can operate either 10, 100, or 1000 megabits per second, depending on the style and type of connector. On this particular machine, this is a 1 gigabit per second connector, but you wouldn't know that just by looking at it. Moving a little bit lower, you'll see where we have our expansion cards, and there's space on this tower for 4 of these. The top one and the bottom one are currently not in use, so we just have these blanking plates with that plus sign in the middle that's just serving to keep dust out of the inside of the computer. Underneath that, in the second position and the third position, we have 2 different graphics cards. Now, the first one you see has 4 connectors on it, 3 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI. The one below it has 1 display connector on it, and this is called a DVI connector, or Digital Video Interface. Now, DVI is actually an older style and has been largely replaced by HDMI and DisplayPort in modern machines. And finally, at the bottom, we have our power supply. And you can see this is actually a smaller power supply because it's only taking up about half of the width of the case instead of the full width of the case, like you'll see in more powerful ones used in gaming PCs. Now, as we zoom out one more time, the other thing I want to point out in these cases is that you do have thumb screws on the right side machine components of us. All the ports and cables underneath it. Once you do that, you can then look at all of the different components. Let's go ahead and start with the bottom. Now on the bottom, we can again see the power supply, but instead of only taking up half of the space, it takes up the full width of the machine from left to right, going from that silver screw to the other silver screw. As we move up, we have again 4 different places for us to put expansion cards. In this particular one, slots 1 and 4 are both blanked out, just like the previous office computer we looked at. But slots 2 and 3 are being used by a graphics card. This graphics card does have 4 ports, and you can see there is HDMI and then 3 different display ports there. Now, this particular graphics card actually takes up 2 of these expansion slots because it's a very powerful graphics card, and powerful graphics cards create a lot of heat. So, as we look at graphics cards later in this course, you're going to see some of them take up 1 slot and some take up 2. When they take up 2, this is because there's additional cooling and cooling fans to be able to pull that excess heat out of that graphics card and out of the case. Now, as we continue up, we're going to zoom in a little bit more here, and we can see again there is a case fan on the back right, based 1/8 of an inch mini jacks. Now moving down, we can see another port cluster, this time with a lot of USB connectors. As we go down, we'll do this row by row. The first row of these has 2 regular style USB connectors. These are not super speed, so these are going to operate at USB 2.0 speeds. This would be good for things like a microphone, a mouse, or a keyboard. As we go down to the second row and the third row, these are identical, and they are 2 different form factors of super speed USB or USB 3.0. The ones on the left side are USB-C, the ones on the right side are standard USB connectors. And then moving to the bottom row, we have 2 more USB style jacks, and again, these are not super speed. You can notice this because there's no SS next to the USB logo, so these are operating at USB 2.0 speeds. And finally, on the bottom right of that port cluster, you're going to see a network jack, and that network jack port is going to be using that RJ45 style network connector. And finally, in the upper right corner of this case, you can see what looks like another USB-C connector, but it has a lock icon next to it. This is actually not a USB-C connector, but instead, it's what's known as a Kensington lock. Now, a Kensington lock allows you to place essentially a metal cable from your desk to the computer tower to make sure people can't steal it, and this will just lock into place in that location. This is very commonly used in laptops, as well as smaller form factor computers that are easy for somebody to take and put in their purse or their backpack and walk out the door. The final one we're going to cover is what's known as an all-in-one computer, and this one is again from Dell. Now you'll notice here, this is a 27-inch all-in-one computer, and it looks just like a monitor with a webcam, but it's actually a full computer. Inside of this monitor, and as I spin it around, you're going to see just how thin it is. It looks just like a regular monitor, but in there is all the components for a computer. Now as we zoom in here on the back, you're going to see the different port cluster we have on the back of this particular computer. As we start from the left side, you will see that we have that Kensington lock that plug into these different computers using these different ports and protocols. Now, by no means is this lesson completely containing every single port you may come across, but as we go through this course, you're going to continue to see different ports for different things
In this lesson, we're going to discuss different USB connector types, including USB Type-A, USB Type-B, and USB Type-C. Let's begin by looking at USB Type-A. If you look at a standard laptop or desktop, you're usually going to see at least one of two different types of USB connectors. The first one is known as a Type-A connector, and it's used for the older USB 1.0, 1.1, and 2.0 standards, but it is still supported in version 3.0 and above. Now, a Type-A connector is a flat rectangular connector that allows you to insert the USB cable only in one direction, because inside of that, you're going to find this little white or black piece that's blocking about half of your interior port. So when you go to plug that USB in, you have to do it in a certain direction to make the pins line up, or it simply won't allow you to connect that device. Type-A is commonly used on most desktops and on some laptops. It's probably the most common one you're going to see and is the standard USB that most of us have used as we're growing up with computers. Next, we have USB Type-B connectors. Now, when you're using older USB 2.0 devices, you're going to come across connectors known as a USB Type-B. Now, there's actually three different Type-B connectors out there. These are the standard Type-B connector, a Type-B mini connector, and a Type-B micro connector. Now, a standard Type-B connector is usually found on larger devices like the back of printers. It's more of a square-shaped port with the corners rounded off on the top, and it can only be inserted in one direction. Now, a Type-B mini connector looks almost like a trapezoid, where you have a longer base and a shorter top, and then it kind of goes up at an angle on the sides. These Type-B mini connectors are often found on earlier tablets and smartphones. And the final Type-B connector we have is what's known as a Type-B microconnector. A Type-B microconnector is shorter and skinnier than the Type-B mini connector and is smaller in form factor than the Type-B connector would be. It's normally used on small devices like wearables, smart glasses, smartwatches, and smaller music players. Now, Type-B connectors for USB 3 actually look a little bit different. So here you can see a USB 2 Type-B connector, and you can see a USB 3 Type-B connector. Notice that the USB 3 Type-B connector has more of a square with a little rectangle on top of it, whereas the USB 2 Type-B connector look more like a square with rounded off corners on the top. These are not interchangeable, and if you're using a Type-B device that's USB 2, it will simply not plug in to a Type-B device for a USB 3 port, and vice versa. Again, whether you're using USB 2 or USB 3 Type-B connectors is really going to come down to what type of device you're using, and in most cases, these are going to be printers and scanners using these Type-B connectors. Now, when it comes to USB 3, it doesn't have an equivalent Type-B mini connector like USB 1.0, 1.1, and 2.0 does. Instead, USB 3 uses a Type-B microconnector, and it looks quite a bit different than a USB 2 Type-B microconnector. On the other hand, if we look at a USB 3 Type-B microconnector, it actually looks almost like a figure eight. And so, as you can see, these are simply not going to be compatible because you have to have the right cable and the right connector for the right device. USB 3 Type-B microconnectors are most often used for portable storage devices like external hard drives, so they can operate at those very fast speeds of 5 gigabits per second or more using USB 3. Finally, let's take a look at USB Type-C connectors. Now, Type-C connectors are used with USB 3 and USB 4. These ports look like a small oval in size, and they can actually be inserted in either direction, making it a lot easier to use than a standard USB cable. Most modern laptops, tablets, and smartphones all tend to use a USB Type-C connector as their primary type of connection because of their small form factor and high speeds. So remember, USB connectors come in all sorts of various types and sizes, and each one is designed for a specific device and purpose. USB Type-A connectors are the most common and widely recognized with a flat rectangular shape that connects in only one direction. Type-B connectors are generally used for larger devices like printers and include variations for smaller devices like Type-B mini and Type-B microconnectors, which are commonly used in older tablets and smartphones. USB Type-C connectors are the latest and most versatile connector type we have, and they allow for reversible connections, and they have quickly become the standard on modern devices like laptops, smartphones, and tablets. You should always use the correct USB type to ensure the right compatibility and proper functionality for your devices, and for the exam, you do need to understand what these different types of USB ports and connectors look like on a cable or on a port if you look at a picture of it, because you want to be able to identify it come test day. So keep this in mind as you're studying for your exam. In this lesson, we're going to talk about USB cables, which is the first type of cable you need to understand as a technician. This is because USB, or Universal Serial Bus, is used by so many different devices these days. Now, we're going to first look at serial connections, and then we'll talk more about USB cables, including their uses, their speed, their distance, and their power limitations. To best understand USB and all of its benefits, you really need to take a moment and talk about the older generation of serial cables first. Now, serial cables were originally connected to computers using either a DB9 or DB25 connector, with a DB9 being the most common. These connectors have a D-shaped design, and they require thumb screws to secure the cable to the computer serial port. Data transmissions over serial cables is considered to be very slow because data is sent 1 bit at a time, and it's measured in bits per second with a maximum speed of 115 kilobits per second. While serial cables have largely been replaced by faster USB connections over the years, they are still occasionally used in specific situations, such as connecting to communication